Emily was a rare elf on campus. She naturally had an impatient look that didn't make her very likable. And being a loner seemed to be a given. This alley wasn't Emily's usual route. She came here just to buy breakfast for the next day. Hand over the money. The harsh voice made Emily frown slightly. Soon she saw what was going on: a robbery. The orc boy being robbed was trembling. The few teenagers doing the robbing were much taller than him. Two were robbing. One was keeping watch. And the other was smoking, because the guy leaning against the wall was the tallest. Emily couldn't help but take a few extra glances. His bangs were too long. There were obvious dark circles under his eyes. His skin was pale. And there was a faint ink tattoo showing at his cuff. He didn't bother to hide his werewolf ears, which had at least 5 earrings and studs, the cigarette but left his lips and fell to the ground. The werewolf looked up and met Emily's gaze, then quickly looked away, acting nonchalant. Guys like this weren't rare in school. They formed gangs, bullied younger students. Emily shifted her gaze and was about to walk past them. However, at that moment, the robbed boy started crying and pleading for Emily's help. Emily looked back again. Apparently, this response encouraged the boy. "Senior, we go to the same school. Please help me." "Okay." Before Emily could respond, the robbers seemed to have heard something interesting. One of them put his arm around Emily's shoulder. "Wow, asking a beautiful girl for help. How interesting." Another one also grinned and said, "Your senior will definitely save you from us." Emily was annoyed by this behavior. She turned to look at the person beside her. "Get away from me." Her attitude was rather bad. But because of her good looks, her intimidation was somewhat lessened. "The senior is angry." The boy who had his arm around her pretended to be scared. "I'm so scared." Ouch. The last syllable was uttered after he was thrown over her shoulder and landed 4 or 5 meters away. He hit the ground hard, and it felt like his spine was about to break. Emily raised her eyebrows slightly. Without caring about her school uniform skirt, she kicked another person who was about to punch her. The person keeping watch was also elbowed hard and crouched on the ground. Covering his face, there was only one left. The werewolf raised his eyebrows and looked at her, showing no intention of attacking. The robbed boy stared in shock at how things had turned out. Then he quickly took the chance, grabbed his school bag, and ran away without even saying thank you. Damn it. The boy who had been thrown over Emily's shoulder spat out a mouthful of saliva and looked angrily at the still leaning against the wall guy. "Aiden, why the hell aren't you helping? I only said I'd watch." The werewolf named Aiden spoke, his voice slightly hoarse. "And..." He paused subtly, his eyes still on Emily. "She's my neighbor." There was a moment of silence. The boy got even angrier. "Damn it." Emily patted the shoulder where she had been grabbed and left. Her mother sent a text message urging her to go home quickly. The bakery was still a bit far from here. Emily walked in front, and Aiden followed behind with his hands in his pockets, keeping a distance of just over a meter. Emily was used to this. She entered the bakery, chose her bread. The bakery clerk winked at Emily. "Coming with your brother again?" Emily looked back and saw Aiden sitting slouched in a chair, playing with his phone. She replied, "He's not my brother." I understand, the clerk said with a knowing look. Little boys at this age are so annoying. Emily ignored her words and pointed to another small cake. "Wrap one of these for me." After buying the bread, Aiden followed Emily towards home again. When they reached the doorstep, Emily turned around, seeing Aiden standing behind her. She took out the individually wrapped small cake. "This is for you." Aiden looked down and took the cake box from her hand, still staring at her. "You didn't participate in the robbery. It's a reward," Emily said. After giving the cake, she felt her task was done and was about to go home. Suddenly, Aiden grabbed her hand. The boy raised his eyebrows, holding the cake in his hand. "What kind of reward is this?" He grabbed her hand, lowered his head, and bit her. A faint tooth mark appeared on Emily's hand. The werewolf's canine teeth were indeed well developed. His slightly rough tongue licked over the tooth mark, leaving a wet trace. "This is a reward." Aiden licked his lower lip, as if he could taste meat from biting someone's hand. Emily frowned and wiped the saliva on Aiden's clothes. "So disgusting." This comment made Aiden tug at the corner of his mouth, his eyes curving. "I knew you wouldn't like it. I did it on purpose." Emily thought she really should have just gone home. By the way, Aiden said. Do you know which school I got into? Emily didn't respond. Aiden didn't care either. Your school. This answer made Emily look up at him. This choice was unexpected yet not entirely. She just didn't know the point of him specifically saying it. Aiden lowered his head and whispered in her ear. Senior. His breath blew on her ear, causing a subtle tickle. I'm 17. Emily smelled the faint smell of cigarettes on him. She said earnestly, you shouldn't smoke even at 17. Emily wasn't really good at dealing with Aiden. Even though their parents thought Emily and Aiden are very good friends. Emily, I'm counting on you to take care of this kid. She had heard this since she was a child, unlike her cold appearance. Emily had a hard time saying no to others, so she silently became what the parents hoped for. Her parents also thought it was a good thing that their withdrawn daughter had a younger brother she could get along with. For Emily, Aiden was really an indescribable existence since childhood. This younger brother, who was 2 years younger than her, had a strange possessiveness. Emily played with others again. Why be with them? I should be enough for you. Aiden was very cute when he was a little boy. His eyes were round, and he had his werewolf ears. His tail wagged, and he looked at her pitifully. This was something Emily couldn't resist. She reached out and stroked the tip of his ear, saying words of comfort. No, my face isn't popular. We were just talking. Her eyes never left his pointed ears. If you touch my ears, you have to only play with me. Aiden's expression when he said this was still vivid in Emily's memory. His eyes were curved. Looking innocent, Aiden had a strong sense of exchange. Whether it was, play with me only if you touch my ears, in the past, or, I should get a corresponding reward if I don't cause trouble, now, time passed. The so-called promises were just fragments in memory. Being 2 years older, Emily went to a higher-level school first. Their routes were no longer the same. Aiden still carried his school bag obediently and waited for her to go to school together. Actually, there were still many overlapping parts of their new routes. But Emily was in her adolescence. Girls at this age had a very sensitive sense of gender, and she was looking forward to making new friends in the new environment. Aiden, to some extent, became a hassle. Emily wasn't sure if Aiden could understand this. She tried to look sincere. Our schools are different now, so our routes will be different too. We can't walk together anymore. She was lying. She said this just to avoid him. A sense of guilt filled her. But she didn't regret it at all. Aiden tilted his head and looked at her, his tail wagging. So don't wait for me anymore, she said, biting the bullet. Aiden, the little werewolf who was half a head shorter than her at that time, slightly narrowed his eyes when he heard what Emily said. His small, sharp canine teeth showed. For a moment, Emily thought he would bite her, but in the end, he just silently compromised. Okay then. He put on an indifferent expression. Thinking back, it seemed that it was from that day on, the guy who could barely behave began to become arrogant. He skipped classes, fought, formed gangs, and caused trouble. He smoked, got tattoos, had piercings, and wore strange clothes. He completely became a different person. When they occasionally met, they pretended not to know each other. When Aiden was being scolded by his parents, Emily watched from the side. Aiden's tall werewolf father slapped his son on the head, extremely angry. Why are you so troublesome? Emily had never seen Aiden's father so angry. She hid behind her mother and peeked. The scolded boy slightly raised his head. His sideways gaze met hers. It was like being targeted by a carnivore, and she felt a chill down her back. From this moment, Emily knew that Aiden was actually very different from the brother she thought he was, but so what? Just avoid him, as long as they didn't come into contact. It was that simple. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, what happened later? The smell of blood. As a werewolf, Aiden was a strong attacking type, but his ability to cause trouble obviously exceeded his ability to handle it. It wasn't strange for him to be surrounded and beaten. Emily didn't know why she saved him. She turned the siren sound on her phone to the maximum. Although they were just punks, they were all students. They scattered in a rush. Emily turned off the sound and came to Aiden, who was leaning against the wall. His hair was stuck together with blood, and he was gasping for breath. Emily squatted down to be at eye level with him. Aiden turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blood spittle. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. When he saw Emily, he tugged at the corner of his mouth. Your face really isn't likable. Are you here to mock me for getting beaten? Emily patted her own face and then asked, why? Why did he become like this? She didn't know which link had gone wrong. Or did he finally find his value after enduring for so many years and started acting recklessly? Then was she meddling in this time? This question seemed to turn on a switch. The then much taller than her boy grabbed her coat, forcing her to get closer to his blood-stained face. His heavy breathing hit her face, making her relatively cold skin feel hot. Everything was different. His voice, appearance, height, and behavior, but his eyes were still somewhat similar to before. His golden animal-like pupils stared intently at her. And he said mockingly, "You finally see me." The smell of blood was too strong. Emily frowned slightly. She took out a handkerchief from her bag and wiped the bloodstains on his face. She said lightly, "Get that tattoo on your neck removed. It makes you look like a fool." The two started communicating again, maintaining a delicate state. This made their parents very happy. They thought that only Emily could make Aiden become a good boy again. The memory ended. Emily woke up from her dream. She opened her eyes and saw the person sleeping beside her bed. Then she turned her head and saw that the alarm clock showed 3 a.m. Expressionlessly, she kicked the extra person off the bed. The person was tough and just turned over and continued sleeping. "Go back." Emily got out of bed and kicked him again. Pulling a midnight raid is something only creepy uncles over 40 do. Don't go down the wrong path. Aiden's eyelashes fluttered. He was too sleepy to open his eyes. He grabbed Emily's foot that was kicking him with one hand. His rough palm sent a tingle through her. He mumbled and licked her shapely calf. "What's the smell of your body wash?" Emily wasn't an easy-to-approach person. Even her classmates thought so. So when a timid boy like a rabbit told the person at the door that he wanted to find Emily, that person double-checked that it seemed like a combination that had no intersection. It took Emily a long time to match the boy in front of her with the one who had been robbed. "I'm so sorry." The junior bowed 90 degrees, almost scaring Emily into taking a step back. "I was so scared back then that I ran away without even saying thank you. I'm really, really sorry." "No, it's okay." Emily waved her hand stiffly. She really wasn't good at dealing with this situation. It was just a small thing. However, this behavior seemed to make the boy even more touched. "You're really a great person." This feeling of being forced to accept a good person card was quite strange. After repeatedly saying that he didn't need to take it to heart, Emily left with the strange feeling of being stared at by big, watery eyes. She recorded a new phone number in her phone. When entering the name, she realized that the boy hadn't told her his name. She turned around again and saw that the short boy was still there, grinning at her with his round eyes. Emily waved at him again and saved his number with the nickname, Bunny. When she was going home from school, she saw the small flower beds and balloons at the school gate. She realized a bit late that today was the day for new students to start school, which meant that from today on, she and Aiden were in the same school again. She still didn't know what to do with Aiden. She had never understood that guy's thoughts. Walking through the path, several delinquent boys were smoking. The white smoke was curling up. Emily frowned slightly and was about to walk past them sideways. "Hey, isn't this your neighbor?" A familiar voice. The boy who had been thrown over Emily's shoulder last time came up to her with a smile. Maybe knowing how capable Emily was, his attitude was relatively good this time. "Senior. Hello. We're your juniors now. When we get extorted in the future, please protect us." There were more injuries on the boy's face. Emily frowned slightly and got closer to him. "Did you fight again?" Emily's closeness made the boy who had seemed careless become nervous. He quickly stepped back several steps, almost hitting the wall, as if his tail had been stepped on. "Let's go." Aiden grabbed Emily's arm. "Your mom is waiting for you to go home, isn't she?" Being dragged like this for a few steps, Emily stumbled to keep up with his pace. "Aiden, why are you like this again?" Emily looked at him helplessly. "When I'm talking to someone else, as a matter of courtesy, you should wait until we're done talking before expressing your thoughts." The boy in front stopped. There was a red light at the street corner. Emily pursed her lips and tried to pull her arm out of Aiden's hand. After 2 attempts, she finally succeeded. She moved her arm, which had become a bit numb from being held. When Emily looked up, she met Aiden's strange expression. "You didn't talk to me," the boy said slowly. "Huh. Emily didn't understand what he was saying for a moment. She squinted her eyes and looked at his expressionless face. I said. The boy raised his voice, looking more determined. He met Emily's inquiring look. You didn't talk to me. I was just standing there. But you walked past me. Because that kid greeted me first. Is this such a hard to understand reason? Emily tilted her head and looked at the boy's serious expression. The uncertainty in her heart grew again. Are you jealous? As soon as this thought came out, she thought it was ridiculous. They weren't those little kids who were only a few years old anymore. Maybe it was because they hadn't been in contact for so long. Although he was now a head taller than her, she still felt like he was the kind of guy who would cry and beg her to pay more attention to him. Yeah. Aiden's answer interrupted Emily's thoughts. His answer was decisive to the point of being paranoid. I'm jealous because Emily should only care about me. But in fact, this kind-hearted person could show kindness to everyone without limit. Aiden stared at her without blinking, as if his golden animal-like pupils could only hold one person's figure. Emily's mind went blank again, and her arms started to feel numb. Just kidding. Aiden said quickly. He looked down at her. Did you take it seriously? Ugh, what a joke. Emily glared at him angrily. I'm sorry. Aiden apologized very quickly. His pointed animal ears drooped softly in front of her, as if inviting her to touch them. Do you want to touch my ears? Ugh. She wasn't the kind of person who would accept an apology just by touching someone's ears. But the furry ear tips were right in front of her. Emily couldn't resist in the end. She reached out and touched the soft ear root, showing a happy expression. She had fallen for it. Aiden swallowed a short moan. Don't touch the ear root casually. The light's green. He naturally put one arm around Emily's shoulder and the other hand on her hip, picking her up like a child. Wait, this was so embarrassing. She suddenly woke up from the happiness of touching his ears. Emily panicked and looked around, trying to jump out of Aiden's arms. If I were you, I'd cover my face. It would be bad if someone we know saw us. Aiden whispered in Emily's ear. His hot breath blew on her ear. Emily is a very independent and cool senior. This kind of compliment was often heard from junior students, but for some reason, it was extremely embarrassing to hear it from Aiden. I'm warning you, if you don't put me down right now, I'll really fight back. Emily bent her arm, showing clear signs of resistance. I see someone Emily knows, Aiden said suddenly. Emily let out a muffled sound and buried her head in his neck. Acting like an ostrich, Aiden knew who this short guy staring at them was. He was the one who had been robbed before and whom Aiden had seen again when he went to find Emily this morning. He was someone they met too frequently. The guy obviously still had a psychological shadow of Aiden. However, he was bold enough to stare at Aiden and the person in his arms with suspicion. Aiden slightly raised his eyebrows, grinned at the guy, showing his sharp teeth. The arm that had been around Emily's shoulder loosened its hold, and he made a slashing motion across his neck. Watching the boy's face turn pale suddenly. That's right. It was a threat. Aiden's eyes curved, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Following the politeness that Emily always emphasized, he said, Hi, senior. One should greet their seniors when they meet. Actually, Emily had entered a busy period. She was about to graduate this year and had a lot of preparations to do. Her teacher repeatedly asked her if she was really planning to go to another city. There are actually many good schools in this city. The teacher pushed up his glasses. But if you want to go out and see the world, that's also great. You can get in touch with different aspects. Yes. Emily nodded and put away the application form on the table. Thank you, teacher. Because of her excellent academic performance, Emily had the qualification to be recommended by the teacher. Passing the teacher's review was half the battle. Although her parents were also curious why she wanted to go to school so far away, they had always respected Emily's opinion. Her father quickly signed the recommendation form. I'm so sad to think that Emily is going to study away from home, her mother said. Still a bit sad. Kids naturally want to see the world when they grow up. Her father smiled at her. And transportation is so developed now. But she's not the type to like running around outside. Her mother was still hesitant. That's right. Emily wasn't the type to be out and about. But why did she want to leave? Emily's fingertips dug slightly into her palm. feeling a dull pain. She smiled and said, "I'll go back to my bedroom first." Back in her bedroom, she closed the window. After thinking for a while, Emily locked the window tightly. These days, Aiden had been showing up around her more and more frequently, although he didn't do anything strange. It still made her nervous. The transparent window reflected her confused expression. She finally remembered that when she left Aiden back then, besides the emerging sense of gender difference, she also felt a suffocating feeling as if she were trapped in a cage. That's why she tried every means to leave Aiden. But as time passed, she forgot about it. It wasn't until she went back to the old situation that the deep-buried memories came back. Tonight, Aiden wouldn't come into the room, so she thought she could have a good sleep. The doorknob turned. Emily thought it was her mother coming to persuade her. Without looking back, she gave a polite refusal. "I want to be alone for a while." However, it wasn't her mother's voice. A slightly hoarse voice of a young man came from behind her. "Are you tired because you just made a decision?" Emily suddenly looked up and saw another person's figure on the glass gradually getting larger. And then the two figures overlapped. The person was a head taller than her, and his expression was unclear. An inexplicable feeling of fear filled her heart. Emily knew how strong Aiden was and how fierce he could be in a fight. She believed that Aiden wouldn't hit her, but she wasn't sure about her belief. From beginning to end, Emily never really understood Aiden. He always surprised her. Emily had few contacts with others and even fewer friends. She was a novice at dealing with people. She had never been close to anyone, but someone insisted on getting close to her. "Why are you going to another state?" The young man's palm was placed on her shoulder, making it feel hot. Emily felt him lean down and whisper in her ear, "Is it because of me?" She froze. She wanted to lie, but Emily wasn't good at it. So there was silence. And more silence. After a while, her shoulder felt wet. Emily turned around in disbelief and saw Aiden's golden animal-like pupils with the irises. He had an expressionless face, but tears were streaming down. His usually pale face had a faint pink tint. "Aiden." Emily heard her voice change. She fumbled around on her pants for a while before realizing she was wearing pajama pants, so she had to use her sleeve to wipe his tears. After wiping several times, her sleeve was completely wet, but Aiden didn't seem to stop crying. Emily put down her hand and looked at him with a frown. With his red nose, Aiden finally looked his age. He's still young, Emily thought, and watched him quietly. When Emily stopped moving, Aiden panicked again. He grabbed Emily's hand and put it on his ear. "You can touch my ears whenever you want from now on. I won't set any conditions," he said pitifully. Emily's hand was pressed against one of his ears. It was hairy, and the part with the earrings was a bit prickly. Aiden's other hand carefully held her other hand. Their fingers intertwined. His trembling was transmitted to her hand. "Please don't hate me. Please don't ignore me," Aiden said. His usually pointed ears drooped down and stuck to his fluffy hair. This was the first time Emily had seen Aiden so anxious. After a moment of hesitation, she pulled her hand out of his and looked at him seriously. "This is not right, Aiden. You shouldn't lower yourself like this. We should be equal. This is the right way to communicate." "No," Aiden shook his head slightly, looking a bit anxious. "Don't you understand? We were never equal from the beginning." He pursed his lips. His lips were brightly colored. "I just didn't lower myself enough. That's why it's like this." Because Emily said she wanted to separate from him, he had been stubbornly forcing himself not to take a step forward, hoping that she would turn back. He had regretted for so long before realizing this. Dignity and self-esteem were never important things. Otherwise, why would he feel so hurt when someone walked by with a school bag, their eyes casually glancing over him? He had long since been reduced to the dust and no longer held his head high. In winter, it was snowing. Emily dragged her suitcase out of the car. The wheels left 2 tracks in the snow. City A was warmer than their city. Emily was dressed a bit thinly and exhaled a puff of cold air. She got home 2 days earlier than she had said. It wasn't to surprise her parents, but she subconsciously felt that this news would definitely reach someone's ears. If that person heard about it. Emily narrowed her eyes and recalled what had happened. "I just didn't lower myself enough. That's why it's like this." Aiden's voice seemed to be right next to her ear. That day, there was a peaceful, one-sided argument. Then, how did she reply? "This is not right." She was so determined at that time that she was surprised at herself. she said calmly and seriously. Aiden, stay away from me. She pushed away the boy who was much stronger than her and saw his stunned and hurt expression. His ears drooped. His body was trembling. And his eyes were full of pleading that it was really terrible. So terrible that she herself started to feel bad. But she still forced herself to finish speaking. I can't keep in touch with you anymore. She finally said what she hadn't said back then. I'm very sorry. Aiden composed himself and finally managed to squeeze out a smile. Emily, you know I like you, right? She knew. Even the most insensitive person would have a faint feeling. You're so sly. The boy said. You've been pretending not to know all this time and only tell the truth when you can't stand it anymore. Because you'll grow up. Emily squinted slightly, just a little slower. Soon you'll realize that this feeling of dependence isn't love. And this imposed bondage isn't the best way. So, at that time, you won't run away from me in such a flustered way. The memory ended. The road wasn't as flat as she had expected. The suitcase bumped as it was dragged on the ground. Emily exerted herself to lift the suitcase a little to avoid unnecessary damage. There was the sound of birds flapping their wings. She involuntarily turned her head and saw several pigeons huddled together for warmth. She smiled, but when she looked back again, her smile froze on her face. She saw a tall and thin boy standing there. He was a bit unfamiliar. She hadn't seen him for over a year. He seemed to have grown taller and stronger. He was wearing a black down jacket. His face was clean, and the tattoos on his hands were gone. He wasn't even smoking. In the past, whenever Emily met him, he always had a cigarette in his hand. Occasionally, he would even have a cigarette craving in front of her, just holding the cigarette without lighting it. What was going on now? Should she pretend not to see him and act like she didn't know him? Her hand, which was about to wave hello, froze in mid-air. Emily watched the boy walk forward without looking sideways. It seemed that they were going to go their separate ways. This result actually made her feel relieved. When she reached out to lift the suitcase again, someone easily picked it up from the other side and carried it on their shoulder. Let's go, Aiden said simply. Emily had to quicken her pace to keep up with him. The suitcase was placed at Emily's doorstep. Aiden didn't seem to have any intention of getting closer. After stopping, he nodded at Emily and then left. Emily stared at his back for a long time. Her hands were red from the cold. Her parents were very surprised and happy to see Emily's return. After putting away the suitcase, Emily lay on the bed, hugging a pillow and in a daze. After a while, she heard her mother calling her to eat. You carried such a heavy suitcase back by yourself. Why didn't you call your dad? No, Aiden carried it, she replied. Oh, Aiden, her mother reacted. Aiden is a good kid now. He doesn't fight anymore, doesn't smoke either. And he's all cleaned up. I always thought that kid was good at heart, just had a rebellious phase. Yeah. She just focused on eating. Did you say thank you to Aiden? No. Still eating. Remember to do it next time. Okay. Back in her bedroom, Emily suddenly felt that the room was too stuffy, so she went to the window and opened a small crack. 4 hours had passed since she got home, unpacked, and now had dinner. She saw Aiden standing silently downstairs in the snow and cold wind. He didn't look up, just stood there with his head down, lost in thought. Nearly an hour later, as the sun set, he finally started to walk away. Emily stood on the balcony for an hour, reflecting on herself. She didn't know what was the best thing to do. She didn't want Aiden to be like this, but she couldn't tell him what to do either. She had been acting like an elder for so long that she had forgotten that there were many things she didn't understand. The next day, her mother took the initiative to invite Aiden to have lunch at home. After the meal, she told him to go and sit with Emily. Emily rented a lot of DVDs. It would be great to watch some movies. You two were so close when you were kids, but now that you're grown up, you're less in touch. The older generation always liked to bring people closer. No need, Aiden said, not looking in Emily's direction. I have something to do this afternoon. I really did rent a lot of movies. Emily grabbed Aiden's sleeve. Come and watch them with me later. Aiden was dragged upstairs by Emily. When they reached the bedroom door, he hesitated. Come in, Emily said. A bit annoyed. You used to come in even when I didn't let you. Right. He was pulled in and the door was closed. After the door closed, Emily calmed down. took a deep breath, and told the truth. Yesterday, I saw you standing downstairs for a long time from this window. There was silence. Even if you're upset with me, you shouldn't do this. It's your body. I'm fine. What if you catch a cold? I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. I'm sorry. I still like you. I told you not to apologize. Emily was stunned when he said the second half of the sentence. His eyes were less fierce and less full of complex emotions than before, making him look much softer. Aiden said gently, I still like you. I know you'll push me away again when you hear this. That wasn't the case. She wanted to refute, but she couldn't say anything. She watched as the boy pulled down his collar, revealing some reddish-brown marks on his collarbone. There used to be a tattoo there, and now these marks looked like remaining scars. I got rid of my tattoos, quit smoking, stopped hanging out with those guys, and started studying hard and listening to the teacher. He said, I did all the things I thought were difficult. Emily pursed her lips. But you still won't like me, right? Aiden covered his eyes with one hand. I thought if I told you I didn't like you anymore, with all these changes, you might believe me. But what would be the cost if you found out I was lying? Emily lowered her eyes. I'm so bad at lying to you. You'll definitely find out and then tell me to stay away. Emily sighed. Emily, you're so gentle to everyone, but you're the cruelest to me. Your tongue, Emily said, pointing at Aiden's mouth. What's that in your tongue? The guy who had been lowering his head reacted a bit slowly, then whispered, a tongue piercing. Take it out, Emily ordered. What? Aiden blinked, not understanding why things had suddenly taken this turn. He had just been quietly accusing her of being unkind. Take it out. Emily lifted his chin, making him look into her eyes. Looking at his surprised expression, she said calmly, Aiden, I know you better than you think. Maybe I don't fully understand your thoughts, but I know how to see through your disguise. It was the same before. And it's the same now, whether you act rebellious or pitiful. The reason is the same. She watched as the boy's expression gradually became more complex. You're not that timid. This is just a way for you to get my attention again. Emily looked at him expressionlessly. You're just trying every means to keep me by your side. There was no need to guess his purpose. Aiden slowly raised the corner of his mouth and smiled. It only took a moment for him to go from a pale-faced boy to a beaming one. He drawled, sounding a bit regretful. You saw through me. I almost made it. Emily sneered. It's really hard to take out the tongue piercing. Aiden squinted his eyes and tilted his head. So, as a reward, can I kiss you, Emily? After being exposed, he didn't feel any guilt. Instead, he became more relaxed and started bargaining arrogantly again. If you touch my ears, you can't leave. If you want me to take out the tongue piercing, I want to kiss you. This guy never changed. Pay more attention to me. So childish.